Good afternoon, Hugh. How are you today?
Well, you know, it's one of those days. I'm preparing a lecture for Brookes University students for next week, and it's one of those moments. I started going through it, thinking, well, I'll use what I did last year, and I started going through it, and then I discovered that I'm actually lecturing the people I also spoke to about 3 weeks ago, and I've already used half of the material. So it's that moment to go. I've got to scrabble around and in the process of doing that, and obviously it's a little tangential, I'm lecturing about killing for conservation, which is something which is a really close to my heart as a subject of investigation, because I don't know if you know, the very beginning of my hedgehog work was up in Orkney. And I was on North Ronaldsay, the most northerly of the Orkney archipelago. And there were hedgehogs had been introduced by the postman in mid-1970s. And by the mid-1980s, they were everywhere. And they were being accused of eating the birds' eggs, the ground nesting birds, and like the Arctic terns. And so my first bit of real field work was looking at that issue. And so then in the early 90s, I got called in to work with the Uist hedgehog story. And in the Outer Hebrides, the same thing had happened. Hedgehogs introduced, hedgehogs being accused of degrading the breeding success of ground nesting birds. But there, the decision had been taken to kill the hedgehogs. And so I ended up, I actually went there as a journalist to do a piece for Radio 4, but then I just saw what was going on. I thought, no, this is just nonsense. And so I began working with the campaign, and it's been, I mean, we're still involved with this. So from 2003, did I say I got the year wrong? 2003, I think they started killing hedgehogs. Then after 3 or 4 years, they stopped because of our campaign, but they still haven't solved the problem. Anyway, so this is all stuff which is, I find deeply fascinating, because we make a mess as a species, and then we feel we ought to tidy it up. And when it comes to these wildlife conflicts, frequently the only tool in the toolbox seems to be, let's just kill one of them. And I feel this is an inadequate reaction. So anyway, so today has been full of reading about philosophy and trying to understand the work of Immanuel Kant from the 18th century, and realizing that my life as an ecologist hasn't trained me to be a philosopher, and I'm having to read every paragraph about 10 times to try and understand what's going on. So that's probably not what you wanted to hear about.
It's actually just what I wanted to hear about, really, because I was going to ask you how long you've been sort of following, studying, working with hedgehogs. So actually that went right into what I needed to know. So yeah, it was about, you know, how far back did your interest and your career span from hedgehogs, you know, because it's quite a fascinating subject, and they've been around, obviously, for however long, you know what I mean? So I think it's about how long have you been doing, you know, the work.
I mean, it's been, say, mid 1980s. So 1985, I went up to Orkney, which, if we do the maths, is a really long time ago, 35 years ago. And so most of the people I sort of studied with, you know, ecologists, what they tend to do is they'll go into it, and then they'll do a piece of research on one species, and gradually they'll move up the charismatic megafauna till eventually they're studying elephants and lions. Yeah, that's where you go. And I got to hedgehogs, and it was like, I found my kin here. And it's I mean, also, there's very little work back in the mid-1980s, very little work had been done on the basic day-to-day life of hedgehogs. I mean, there's a lot of scientific papers written about the hormonal fluctuations of hibernating hedgehogs, for example, because that is obviously, I mean, it's fascinating, but it's much easier to collect that data. You get your hedgehog, you stick it in a fridge, and you take its blood. Very crudely, but I mean, they don't do those experiments anymore. But yeah, that was the sort of thing that was being done, and because the hedgehog's not being considered a pest, and it's not been a sort of game animal, and it's not a food animal particularly, nobody paid much attention. And so there was, I mean, Dr. Pat Morris, who has evolved into being my mentor on these things, and one of his students, Dr. Nigel Reeve, another friend, you know, they were sort of breaking ground on this. And you've got to also consider that most animals have a fight or flight response. So most animals will either, when you get close to them, will either bite you or will run away, or both. And that makes them very hard to study. But the hedgehog doesn't have a fight or flight response. The first thing it does is it frowns. The spines come forward over the face. And then if it's really bothered, it rolls up into a ball. And you can just wait till it unrolls.
hopefully not too long before it unrolls again. Yeah, that's fascinating. It is fascinating. I remember when we did the talk before on World Environment Day with you as well, we were talking about hedgehogs then, and I learned so much about this wonderful, wonderful species that we have. And obviously our campaign for Hogtober is something that we decided to do because we felt that it was important for, you know, as you know, we work very much in the business sector.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got a lot of businesses who work with us. And I think it's important that they realise that this is a species that is really in need of some help. And, you know, we're hoping to do that in the future and have many more campaigns that can raise funding and raise awareness for hedgehogs and other species. And I think it's just something they never really think about because, you know, we work in a lot of business parks as well in business areas, and I dare say there will be hedgehogs there, Hugh. There will be hedgehogs all over, really, if there's a habitat or a suitable corridor, I suppose, for them to be able to.
But I mean, the business parks are an interesting example because a lot of time the planners have, well, the designers have stepped in, and they're using the sort of very traditional, pretty ecologically useless planting regimes. And certainly what I'm trying to do with developers now. So obviously we've got my petition, which is nearly at 1 million, and is looking to get developers to put in the hedgehog highways. But this is just foot in the door stuff. Because yeah, you can talk to your business parks and your business partners and say, well, this is great, but actually let's look at the wider surrounds. So a new housing development, fine, but when you've got your public open spaces around it, which they're obviously going to put in place as part of their obligations to the community, let's plant it up with native species. Let's plant it up with species which have got the right sort of leaf size for hedgehogs. You know, don't go planting loads and loads of sort of sycamores and the like with big leaves, but you get smokes, get some hazel, get some all of the things, lime leaves, the right sort of size. You get things like that in there, and then look at making sure there are pollinating plants put in there, and as you absolutely say, Sharon, making sure that there are corridors. So you talk to the people who run a business park, get them to reconsider what's planted there, get an ecologist to come and look at it, but then to look at the map and look down on it and go, okay, so where can we make the corridors? Now, a lot of business parks, unfortunately, because they're sold on the point that they're going to be, you know, good access to the road network, means that they're right next to dual carriageways and ring roads, which provides an element of fragmentation which is difficult to overcome. But again, thoughtful looking at this can make a big difference. Put up a barrier so that the road is impenetrable to hedgehogs, and try and funnel, you know, keep the hedgehogs in an area which you can spread along if needs be. No, I mean, it's invaluable to find these people. I would, you know, I have the capacity to alter my garden, and that's it. But I'm really enjoying the fact that working with developers, because they've got the capacity to alter, you know, hundreds of hectares, and same with the people you're working with, and massive differences can be made then.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I mean, that's what we're absolutely adamant that we're doing anyway. We're doing quite a few pollinator parks now. We're on our second one next week. We planned up the second one on a retail park. So I think, and again, it's about, you know, we do sort of like an environmental impact assessment to make sure that we are not, first of all, we're not encroaching on something that's already there, but also making sure that we can get that connectivity. And I think that's going to be increasingly important as well. So we're really excited about that. And we will be, no doubt, coming to you for a bit of help, no doubt. We might even take you on as a consultant. You never know.
I'll come and visit anytime.
For business parks. So we are doing a lot of work around that. And I think that's mostly where the importance of the species comes in as well, you know, the fact that they are now on the red list. Is that right? There are,
yeah, so for the UK, they're UK red list species. But I think it's important also that maybe we always bear in mind that we've got this charismatic species in the hedgehog, which will open the doors for us. We can get in and we can talk to people about making changes to their landscape that they would never consider if you went in there talking about toads. Or slugs or whatever, you know, I mean, it's just, they're not going to be interested. But if you go in there talking about something that they love, you've got their attention straight away. And when you are opening things up, slugs was a bad example, but yeah, certainly looking at the small mammals out there, you know, they will benefit enormously from the corridors as well. And so will the insects, and so will the birds, and so will the bats. But the hedgehog is just that way in. And so who are you working with on the pollinator parks? Is this just your own work, or are you working with one of the bigger charities?
No, we do it all ourselves. Basically, it's because of who we are. We're a community interest company and we're all business women. We have 3 directors who are all business women. So we set up a community interest company mainly to deal with climate change, obviously taking climate action in the climate emergency. But we took on the role of, we could see that there was a serious problem with pollinators. I drove past a business park one day, saw a queen bee and thought, well, where on earth is she going to land? Because there's nowhere that was anything like any nectar-rich plants or anything. There was just nowhere. It was all shrubs and, you know, green stuff. There's never really any flowers or anything like that. But we just took it on as a project. And because we already work in the business sector, it was easier for us to say, well, who are our main audience? Who is our audience? It's the business world. So basically, we started our first project a year ago and planted up an area in a business park on the River Wear in Sunderland. And that was our first one. So it was very much a trial project to see, we work with ecologists, we have an ecologist on board with us, and we have people who have a vested interest in that particular business park. We contact the businesses, we get volunteers in, we order the right plants or British native wildflowers and try and sort of complement, you know, what is already there. And it basically, we just adopt a no mow approach as well. So we make sure that the business parks don't mow. And then it's amazing what actually comes up when they just don't mow the grass. We had 6 bee orchids on the first pollinator park that we ever did, which was incredible, really. And then we've got another one on the, we're just gathering traction, really, I suppose. We've got another project starting next week on a retail park, which again is an area that's ideal for pollinators if we plant it up. And then on a larger scale, we're addressing all of the other business parks across the northeast, and see if we can get that, the connectivity, I suppose, of just connecting up the green spaces, but also hedgehogs, I suppose, is something else that we've been thinking of, about how can we, again, without endangering them even more by, you know, putting them next to traffic, how can we do the more sensitive areas that are away from danger areas? So I think that would be something we could do as well. And we are working with housing associations as well, Hugh. You know, we've got housing associations here, one particular one, who do put hedgehog fencing in. So they are actively putting hedgehog fencing in all of their new housing.
Which housing association is that? Are you able to say?
I can actually say, because they are one of our clients, and I'll tag them in. It's the 13 group. Okay. So obviously they are really active in looking at ways to improve biodiversity. So they've got a really good chap working for them who's very passionate about, you know, implementing measures that will improve biodiversity on their housing project. So they've been looking at hedgehog fencing. And I think if we could get all of the Northeast development sector doing that, I think it would be a really good thing. So,
so you know, we've got the from the developer's point of view, we've got Bovis Homes, who have signed up and have come on board and said, you know, they'll make where possible all of their new developments hedgehog friendly, and they then bought Linden Homes, and Linden Homes are following the same guidance. And I happen to know that there are some very interesting conversations going on within Taylor Wimpey as well at the moment. So, you know, there are things happening, and it is, I gave a lecture, what day is it? I gave a lecture 2 days ago, in fact, to DEFRA. It was their lunchtime sort of entertainment, their brown lunch lecture thing, and it was great fun. But I had that sort of conversation with them, saying, look, you know, we've got these opportunities, but we've actually got, you know, my petition, which was calling for a change in the law, got halfway with the change in the National Planning Policy Framework, but it's that's only guidance still. We haven't got compulsion. And we, you know, how do we do this so that we get to compulsion? And do you really, as the legislatures, as it were, the people actually setting the rules for these things, do you really want big business to turn around and actually trump you? Because in the end, they're going to. Already, they're beginning to do the stuff which they should be being told to do. And I want people to be told to do it, because it means for those few who don't, they can then be forced to do it. At the moment, it's just that we're finding developers recognizing that at 50 pence more per house, yeah, it's not really going to break the bank by putting in a hedgehog highway. And if people who buy the house really, really don't want a hole because of their small dachshund or the tortoise or whatever, they can put a plant pot in front of it. You know, it's not the end of the world, but making the holes is hard work. So it's a really easy win for developers. I mean, this is, of course, parking to one side. whether the development should have taken place in the first place, whether it should have been built there, all of those things. I am interested and passionate about making sure that we don't lose these pockets of wild space, which have become so crucial, really noticeable during lockdown. We've got a couple of spots of green space within the ring road of Oxford, which are slated for development. And it's just a real shock, because this would have been conversations which took place years and years ago. And suddenly we've had this, this spring and summer where people have been out and walking and rediscovering patches, and then suddenly discovering that these rediscovered patches are about to be destroyed. So we need to find ways of making sure that the hedgehog gets that degree of sort of compulsory protection and care, and that we don't go devastating bits that we shouldn't be.
I think this is one of the good things about the talks that we do here as well, because we're heavily connected with the construction sector up here in the North East. We are members of the Construction Excellence North East group, which you'll get more or less every single developer in the north of the region. And I think it's about, one of the other things we want to do is share some best practice workshops, I suppose. But we're not ecology experts. We don't have an ecologist working with us. What we are is climate action people. That's what we do. So when you say, do we work with other people, we are always connected with all the wildlife trusts up here and the wetlands trust, and we work with all of the NGOs and people like that. But I think that where we can add value is that we can do things quickly. We're not funded by any lottery or anything. We're funded by corporates. So we are working from corporate social responsibility funding from our sponsors, and our sponsors basically sponsor us to take action, and whatever form that might be, and they're always very, very willing to fund the projects that we're working on. So I suppose where we are quite unique, and we can work quickly, we can work swiftly, we can get stuff done, can mobilize projects really quickly, and that's basically what we're doing with all of these. So we're thinking about setting things like team hedgehogs up and stuff like that, where we know that we can pick half a dozen businesses in the Northeast that might want to champion a hedgehog project, and some of those might be developers and some of them might be in the construction sector. And then it's about that cascade effect, isn't it? So it's about people taking that on board. And I think if they legislate it, it's going to be easier as well. If it's legislatively driven, they have to do it. But it would be better if they really wanted to do it, wouldn't it?
Oh, yes. No, I want both. I mean, I'm greedy. I went round it was a sort of genetics diagnostic big laboratory place outside Cambridge. I was invited there to do one of their lunchtime talks. This was in the jolly days when we'd go to these things in person, and they gave me a walk around the site afterwards, and it's an enormous site. And it's and they were just saying, well, look, we want to be able to manage this better for all sorts of wildlife, but how can we do it for hedgehogs? And it was just the potential there. It was astounding, and we had lots of great ideas. But what's interesting is with these larger companies, I see the parallel with a campaign which the hedgehog, I work with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society as well, that we're funding, is called the Hedgehog Friendly Campus. And it's a simple idea. It's this amazingly dynamic woman called Jo, who I met at the University of Sheffield, and she had just gone, well, she talked to the land managers at the University of Sheffield, and she talked to the wider range of people, the park managers, and said, well, how can we link things up? How can we do this? And then she did it in Sheffield. She said, well, wait a minute, we could do this wider. And so it's become like you can sort of get your different bronze, silver and gold medals for the more that you do. And I'm wondering whether there may be some initiative which actually could be, you could model what Jo's done with the Hedgehog Friendly Campus and actually set that degree of competition amongst the various businesses you're working with, finding out what are the different things they could do, encouraging them to do them, and finding some suitable way of rewarding them. I mean, the end result is, they get loads of this done. You invite me up and I'll do one of my extremely rude stand-up routines.
Right, you're on. That's definitely a plan. That's definitely a plan. No, I think you're right. I think it's I mean, we are linked now, I think, on social media with the Hedgehog Friendly Campus people.
Oh, good.
And I think that's important for the universities and people that we work with up here as well. And also, I mean, I'm sure lots of the charities that we work with as well, and some of them that we are getting to know, are also looking at schools as well, because we have a schools project that will be kicking off later on in the year, well, towards December. And they're very keen to explore hedgehog-friendly gardens as well, because they've got a really sort of quite a sheltered area, I suppose. And so I think, you know, about encouraging the schools to become involved as well. And it's all getting it all, it's that linking up, isn't it, really, that we need to do more of that linking up. And I think that's going to be a really good way forward as well, which we're very, very keen to get involved in. So I suppose
the school thing, it has that extra level of advantage. I mean, I was a couple of weeks ago going around a primary school about 3 or 4 miles away from here. And it was great fun because it was actually in person as well, which is always such a delight. I love doing primary school talks, and I'll be doing a sequence of them later in the beginning of next year, because you've got an audience of kids who are enthusiastic, but they've then got the capacity to change their parents as well. And so there is that sort of the trickle up effect. You infuse these children with the love of hedgehogs, and with that the love of the natural world, and then you take it home, let them fly, because it's amazing what changes happen. And so they will make their primary school grounds hedgehog friendly. I've already got solutions to the problem of the fence they've got all the way around it. We just stick bits of drain pipe underneath the mesh fence, because the mesh fence is down to the ground. You just lift a little bit up and you stick a drain pipe 13 centimeter diameter, and that'll allow hedgehogs to get in and out. The rats are making their way in anyway, there's no need to worry about that. And it's small steps, and you don't tidy up so much, you know, get rid of the cult of tidiness. So, you know, get bundles of leaves and leave the leaves in along the borders, in corners. Let the hedgehogs take the leaves to make their nests for their hibernacula. You know, these are simple things, and the kids get excited. And on top of that, the ask now I've suggested to them is find one of the parents who's got one of these trail cameras, a nighttime motion sensitive camera. Get it set up in the school grounds at night. In the morning, get the kids to come in, have a look and see what's on it. It's exciting.
It is, absolutely, and I totally agree. I think that's going to be, so is there, you know, when you say this hedgehog friendly campus, is there a similar project for schools to be specifically involved in? Is that,
no, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm doing it as in Oxfordshire, as I run a small campaign called Hedge Ox, and so we simply the schools that know about me book me in to come along. And whether it's just to provide sort of entertainment for the kids, or whether it is to actually look at I always want to look at the grounds too. And it just is, yeah, at the moment it's obviously it is all a bit hamstrung. You know, I would love to be going out more and doing far more in person, but yeah, it's tricky.
Well, I think we should start doing some work on that with you as well, because we would like you to come up here anyway to the Northeast next year and open this project when we finally launch.
Oh, brilliant.
Very, very good. So it's all very exciting stuff. So I suppose going back to hedgehogs in general then, because it's obviously coming up to their quite sort of important part of year when they need to be, you know, they need to be big enough, I suppose, and, you know, have enough food and be able to go into that hibernation process. There's been quite a lot of information though, you know, going around at this time of year with all of the, I mean, with our October campaign, we've been sharing a lot of information about what is the ideal weight for a hedgehog going into hibernation.
Stop just one moment, please. So we have a problem with this, and I speak as the British Hedgehog Preservation Society here. We have a problem with this. There are a lot of hedgehog rescues around the country of very varying standards, and I'm sure each and every one of them loves the hedgehogs passionately and they do their best for them. But an example of why we really would love to see a degree more focus on, well, science on these things is a couple of years ago we had the absurd situation of one hedgehog rescuer telling people in the community that they must get every hedgehog under the weight of 900 grams into care because they need to be fattened up to survive hibernation. Now, that's silly anyway. We had another rescue saying any hedgehog seen which is weighing more than 950 grams needs to be brought in to be put on the diet so that they can lose weight to survive hibernation. So we had this 50 grams Goldilocks weight that was okay for hedgehogs. And this is utter nonsense. What we really have learned to understand, and the carers out there who are willing to be sensible, understand it too. You can't base a hedgehog's ability to survive hibernation on weight. You can have a hedgehog weighing 700 grams that's really sort of skinny and poorly, and you can have a hedgehog weighing 400 grams that's really quite rotund and really fit. It's really worth seeing whether the hedgehogs are well or not. If the hedgehog is out in the daytime, if the hedgehog, it looks like it's sunbathing, if it looks a bit wobbly, like it's a bit drunk, if it's got flies near it, if it's got a sort of dust over it, which is actually fly eggs, if it's got lots of ticks, then intervene. Get it to a hedgehog rescue centre. If it's a small one, a baby, the size of your fist, then yes, at this time of year, it needs help. But if it's an adult, which is a bit small, and it looks fit, well, if it's out at night, feeding well, I would leave it alone. Don't interfere with the hedgehogs unless it is exhibiting the key signs of it being unwell. And it's with great credit to Lucy Bierman Brown, who's an academic at Hartpury University in Gloucestershire. She's now twice pulled together hedgehog carers for meetings because we so need that community to be willing to listen and not to reiterate things which are clearly nonsense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's good as well, because I say there's a lot of information. If you were new to the hedgehog world, I mean, the best place obviously to go is going to be the Hedgehog Preservation Society, isn't it? They are like they are the main sort of organisation, I would think, that I would say would be the first place and port of call before you start doing anything, I would have thought.
Well, actually, for the first thing you do, you find a hedgehog which is in need. I'm going to get you the number now, so it's on. We shall repeat it, but you give them a call 24 hours a day on 01584 890 801. And the Hedgehog Society web address is britishhedgehogs.org.uk. And they have an answer phone system, and it goes into a phone tree. You'll be finding your nearest hedgehog rescue as soon as possible. And the thing about the Hedgehog Society is that, yes, we work with carers, but we also work with the scientific community, and that's more my side of things. So it's a bit of is both sides of it coming together, and I really think that is absolutely important.
So yeah, and I suppose it's really important. It's like you say, you don't want this whole sort of army of hedgehog rescuers just bringing hedgehogs in left, right, and centre, do you? You don't want that. That
also it's conflicting advice as well. Lots of conflicting advice, because there are different carers who know that what they do is right, but what they do is wrong, and it becomes very challenging. I mean, for example, a few weeks ago, I had a social media spat with one of these rescues because they were stating that hedgehogs don't eat slugs, and I'm just going, but they do eat slugs. And I often get sent photographs. Indignant people send me photographs of a food bowl out and a big slug on one side and a hedgehog on the other side, and they're both eating the food rather than the hedgehog eating the slug. I said, well, of course, the slug, that's like giving somebody a 3-foot long slab of poorly cooked liver covered in hair gel and saying, here's your dinner. Yeah, it's not very attractive. So hedgehogs do eat the small little grey field slugs, the things which cause a lot of damage, and they're hidden and you don't really see them do it. Now, slugs also carry parasites which will end up going into the hedgehog, and it's a cycle which goes from hedgehog to slug to hedgehog to slug, and this is an entirely natural thing. And of course hedgehogs do eat slugs, because over millions of years this relationship has evolved to the point that we've actually got a way of assessing whether hedgehogs are in a landscape. It's hard work going out with a torch every night trying to find hedgehogs, but it's now been, it's a Gower Bird Hospital did the work, and they've now shown it does work. You collect slugs as opposed to counting hedgehogs, and you grind up slugs and you check the DNA within the sample, and if the parasite is there, Crenosoma striatum to be precise, it springs up, and that parasite can only be in the slugs if there are hedgehogs in the landscape. So it's that sort of lack of ability to sort of understand that hedgehogs, yes, we don't want hedgehogs to eat slugs because there's a build-up of parasites, but nobody's going out and collecting slugs to feed to hedgehogs, I really hope. It's just a case of trying to have a sort of scientific discussion and really hoping that people will be willing to listen.
Yeah, so it boils down to, people need to research it properly, make sure that they are, going to the right professional people for the right advice and making the right decisions. I mean, I think that's really important, isn't it? Yeah.
And I say the British Hedgehog Preservation Society is a good place to start. Don't worry, you don't get me. There are other people who will be the first port of call. I just do the sort of the front of house stuff because well, I like to massage my ego, you know.
Well, that's what we'll be raising awareness of as well as part of this talk. We will be sharing the links to the British
brilliant.
Preservation Society to make sure that people do, because you know we're not experts at all at Climate Action North. We just want to raise awareness of the actual species and the problems that they were having, and then do some fundraising as well, which is really important. So coming to the books that you've written, we're going to look at the books that you've written now. We've all got a copy of this. All of our team have got a copy of this. I really love. And this is just a gorgeous little book as well, isn't it? And I love some of the photographs that are in here. And I just think, you know, for someone who didn't know, I didn't know a great deal about hedgehogs. I knew enough about them. But you can learn so much by just reading this book, Hugh, can't you? Really,
it's a small book. It's aimed as a gift book, and the publishers got in touch with me. They've done the Hare book and the Red Squirrel book, the Fox book, all of these things in the series. And I thought, you know what, this is, because I've written other books about hedgehogs. I've written a monograph on the iconography of hedgehogs, because why wouldn't you? And I've written a book called The Prickly Affair, which is about the whole natural history of it. You know, it's a 70,000 word book. But this, just 10,000. Oh, you've got the Prickly Affair. Now, that famously, the only book ever published to have endorsements on the cover from Jeanette Winterson and Anne Widdecombe. Now, that is an unlikely pairing if ever you were to have one. But in the Graph Egg book, this new one, it's only been out for a few weeks. It was just, I've condensed everything I know about hedgehogs into that sort of small, easily readable space. And the delight of it, I mean, this is like the sort of, in some respects, the lightest book I've written. It sold out the first print run before it was published. You know, it was like, okay, actually this. And so there's a bit of me, I'd love to be writing deeply thoughtful tomes about complicated ecological issues. But in the end, what I really want is to turn people on to nature, to get them excited about nature. And the photos in the book, some of them are mine, but the really good ones, the photographer called Nick Upton. And his photographs are just amazing, really properly amazing photographs. And they've not been out anywhere else before. So it's a really lovely opportunity to learn to love hedgehogs. And I've got a whole bunch of book plates. So I'm going to start a plan now to, if people write to me with a stamped stressed envelope, I will sign book plates so they can have gift included books.
I think we need a gift. We didn't get ours signed, you see. So we were on the first. I think we must have been on the first round of books.
Do you need to give me your physical address so I can send you some book plates?
Yeah, absolutely. I think.
And tell me how many as well, and I should do that.
We were on the first one, I think we were, but it was a really, really good book. I think it is important to realise all of the information that's in there as well. It's like a little toolkit, isn't it? Really, it's like the toolkit of the hedgehog world, because it's got everything in there. Fantastic. And
it's fun. I mean, there's all the silliness as well. I mean, the mythology, the folklore about hedgehogs, which is extraordinary. And though I've been doing this now, I started studying them 35 years ago. I've written 3 books about hedgehogs. I'm still getting new material, certainly weekly, something new pops up, which is amazing. And my most recent post on the petition site, we'll plug that again, change.org/save our hedgehogs, is all about, based around a picture called Hotchie Witchie, which is an old traveler's name for the hedgehog. And it's an amazing story, which a friend of mine had written, a woman called Rima Staines, and she drew this fascinating picture. And it was about the way that the hedgehog was treated as an edge dweller, right on the edge, in between the village or the town and the countryside. And that was the same space that was occupied by the traveling folk. And how the hedgehog was accused of stealing chickens' eggs, of thieving milk from cows, which, if you have a look at the hedgehog's teeth and the cow's teeth, and it's not going to happen. And actually also they were, Queen Elizabeth, so when is that, 16th century, isn't it? They were accused of eating, they were being killed to protect the nation's grain supplies, but actually they're eating the insects which would have been eating. So they were persecuted as a species. And so what she was tying together was this idea that people would be sort of throwing all of the things that were wrong in society, blaming the hedgehog. The hedgehog wasn't the the reason why the cow was producing less milk. The hedgehog wasn't the reason why there was less grain. The hedgehog wasn't the reason there were fewer chickens' eggs. But the hedgehog got the blame. And in the same way that the traveling community got the blame when things went wrong as well. And it was just, gosh, you know, all of this stuff. And I say all of these years doing it, and these things pop up, and you go, this is just wonderful. Somebody should write a book about it. Oh, yeah, I've done that. No,
yeah, well, I think that's what I'm saying. I suppose it's just changing all the time, isn't it? I mean, obviously hedgehogs are having to adapt as well to climate change and all of the things that are going on, and it's going to be an ever-changing subject, really, I suppose, isn't it? So,
oh, there's so much research to be done. Oh, now, interesting, you talk about the climate change impact. So we did a piece of research a few years ago now. We took data that Dr. Pat Morris had recorded in the late 1960s, and when he got a record of first sightings of hedgehogs all the way up the country, from you know, Hampshire through to Scotland, place in the north of Scotland. And his assessment, and it showed it fairly well, is that on the whole, you know, they chart the course of spring, and that the hedgehogs are coming out of hibernation, or be seeing out of hibernation later in the year up in north of Scotland. And so we thought if we reran that project using citizen science work, we might be able to see whether there had been any change because of milder winters. And the data was just useless. It was so muddy, statistically muddy. It didn't generate any clear pattern. And I think what's happened is our winters have changed from being fairly abruptly beginning and ending to sort of cold patch, milder patch, cold patch, milder patch, cold, and they go on a bit longer and a bit wetter. And this has a massive impact on the ability of the hedgehogs to survive in hibernation, because they're being pulled out of hibernation periodically because the temperature rises. And so, yeah, I think the problems they're going to face are going to be less obvious. It's not that you know, all hedgehogs are suddenly coming out of hibernation 2 weeks earlier. It's going to be that they're being disturbed regularly, and this will impact their ability to thrive. But hedgehog rescuers will frequently tell me, you know, they're finding babies in January and February, which they shouldn't be. You know, the hedgehogs should not be courting and mating in December and January.
Yeah, and what about water here? I mean, what about areas where, you know, like flooding and flood risk and stuff like that? Have been subjected to that?
Sharon, you're absolutely right. And if you were to think about a species which is most vulnerable to flooding, it's got to be the hedgehog. A winter inundation. Do you remember the enormous floods in Somerset?
Yeah.
All of the hedgehogs in that area will have been killed.
Yeah.
There's the bigger animals can, you know, the water comes, they can get up, they move. A hedgehog in hibernation, it takes quite a long time for the hedgehog to emerge. It doesn't happen instantly. They have to emerge from hibernation. And if in that period of time they have become inundated and they're underwater, I mean, hedgehogs don't need oxygen for up to 2 hours during hibernation. But you know, if they're emerging from hibernation, yeah, they simply won't survive. And so these wet events are really, really troubling, I think, for hedgehogs. And again, it's about providing then a mosaic of different habitats. So we don't just provide a monoculture of the same thing that we know hedgehogs will like. Let's chop it up a bit. Remembering, you know, some of the best habitats we have created for hedgehogs are our gardens.
Yeah.
Because we've got, we've got, you know, my garden with the log pile, and my neighbour's garden with the compost heap, the neighbour garden beyond there with the really good wildlife pond, and the one beyond that with you know, loads of brambles or whatever. We create all of these different habitats, and we just need to make sure that there is a corridor, that there's a hedgehog highway.
Yeah, and I think that's right as well, and make sure that we've got enough soak up as well. You know, like we've got enough planting and stuff around everywhere really to soak up that water, which is what, you know, I worry about the flood risk element of everything really. I suppose we need to get smarter and clever.
We need beavers, lots and lots of beavers.
Yeah, we do.
I mean, I've just I had the great pleasure over the summer to go and spend time with Derek Gow, whose book Bringing Back the Beaver is just out, and it's such a rude book. I mean, he's a really fascinating person, but if he doesn't like you, I mean, even if he likes you, you'll read about it and we'll go, whoa. But yeah, if he doesn't like you, wow, you really don't want to cross him. And he writes about it very, very humorously. But I mean, his work with, you know, breeding beavers and having the beavers are part of this program of release. I wrote a book called The Beauty and the Beast, and I was up in Perthshire with the Ramsays, and they've released beavers onto their estate up there, and you know, they're with staggering results. I mean, going on that estate, he showed me. Paul Ramsay showed me the aerial photographs of the estate before beavers, and it had been a cattle farm, it had been a beef. And now, and you've got this whole, again, a whole mosaic of different habitats have sprung up. You've got the ponds, which have led to different plants, you know, different trees growing up. You've got an entirely shifted waterway system rather than sort of canalized things that were there. And biodiversity-wise, insect-wise, small mammal-wise, fish-wise, bird-wise, the place has exploded.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got Derek's book as well. It's fascinating to read. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And I just think, you know, we've obviously got the Cumbria Beaver project as well. It's not far from across to Cumbria. That one was, you know, released, I suppose, and announced recently. So it's exciting to think that that's happening more. I mean, they are nature's engineers at the end of the day, aren't they? They can do a lot of work that we could never do. The beavers can do it quickly. So I think it's important that all the species are starting to be linked together. It's really good. I mean, I did worry about the hedgehogs so in flooding. So I think that's going to be something we might even run something else on, you know, about the impact of flooding on the animals to survive as well. So what about this book here as well, Hugh? Because I've been reading this one, which is quite fascinating as well.
Linescapes. You see, that's my sort of more grown-up books, and I do love Linescapes. And partly because the fun I had doing the research for it, because it's so I mean the working title of that book was The Natural History of Anthropogenic Linear Features, and that's what the book's about. And the publishers just looked at me and sort of laughed. But what I've done is look at, I mean, habitat fragmentation again is the issue. It's the way that our landscape is split up. And it dawned on me, it was a train journey going up through from Birmingham to Cumbria up to Scotland. And on that journey, going through these various points of transition out of Birmingham, and you've got the canals running next to the railways, running next to the motorways, and you've got the power lines overhead, and all these linear features. And again, well, this is a complete barrier where we are here. But as you moved into the countryside through Lancashire up through Cumbria, you've got the hedges giving way to the dry stone walls. And this is just interesting, and you could see how the landscape, or well, the vegetation around the walls was different to the vegetation in the middle of the field, because a dry stone wall may look inert, but it's not, because it's actually creating its own sort of microclimates. And so I start looking into this, and it was stimulated, in fact, and this is alarmed some people. I was excited by a government white paper. It was Professor Sir John Lawton, and his paper on it was called Making Space for Nature. And you see, in this, he was looking at the wildlife sites of Britain, and he was pointing out that there needed to be more of them, they need to be bigger, they need to be better quality. But the thing he said in a government white paper, which excited me so much, was they need to be joined up. And that was a moment of going, wait a minute, he's talking about it. Now, at the Hedgehog Society, we were talking about it. Now, frog life is talking about connecting the landscape. Bug life are talking about connecting the landscape. Plant life are talking about connecting the landscape. The wildlife trusts are talking about connecting. We're all fragmented in our own little worlds, talking about connecting things up. And here suddenly, at the big level. And so he was, his conclusion was, give £1.1 billion per year to nature conservation, and we can solve this problem. And it was like, obviously there was horror, conniptions within government. They gave him 2 packets of crisps and a flat can of Coke. And he still made merry with that. But, you know, £1.1 billion a year. The Trident nuclear missile system, going to cost £200 billion. We can't ever use it. It's a pointless thing. That's 200 years of nature conservation money just squandered on this redundant phallic symbol. The bailing out of the banks after the crash in 2008, bearing in mind it was the banks' corrupt behaviour which caused this. Over £1,000 billion was put aside for that. Now, a millennia of nature conservation can be found just like that, because there is a money tree when it comes to money, but not when it comes to nature. And so Linescape sprang from that idea. And so what I did was go to find the linear features all the way from the Dartmoor Reeves, these early field margins from the Bronze Age. right through, going through the hedgerows, the ditches and the dikes, the canals, the dry stone walls, and then the roads, the railways, the power lines. And each of these linear features has the capacity to act as an agent of fragmentation, chopping the landscape up or connecting it. And I found some fascinating work where actually some of these things, which were obviously massive barriers, were also fantastic corridors. I found dormice nesting alongside really hideously busy dual carriageways in Wiltshire. I was nearly unfooted by the articulated trucks' turbulence, and the boxes in the little line of trees were being tossed all over the place, but the dormice were there because it's such a hideous place. No people are there, they were finding this as a great habitat. The horrible discovery that if you look at insect biomass alongside, you've got a hedgerow and you've got really busy road and a verge, hedgerow, field. The insect biomass and biodiversity on the side by the road is much greater because we've degraded our farmland so severely that actually this stretch of land, the soft estate, can be so valuable. I worked on a book with the amazing artist Edward Chell called Soft Estate, looking at these margins, these linear features around the landscape. Really, really interesting. The canals are a complete barrier to many species, but obviously an amazing corridor for species. Even the power lines, these things which you would think are just a hideous blot on the landscape. Worcestershire Wildlife Trust, I think it was, working with the National Grid, creating the concept of a natural grid. And the simple idea was you've got these substations around which nothing can be built because there are all sorts, it's very noisy, it's a bit scary, and you need to have access at all times. So you've got planning controls around a substation. So why don't you manage that space for wildlife? Okay, so you create a donut of wildlife, good wildlife around it. And then the line that heads off across the landscape of these enormous, high voltage cables. The farmers who own that land, whoever owns the land underneath it, has a management agreement with the network to make sure they don't plant Sitka spruce under it or Linlandia underneath or big houses or stuff. They've got to manage it. So why not manage it with wildlife in mind? Have conservation grazing where you can along it. The spaces which the pylons sit over can't be harvested. Why don't you have those rich with wildflowers? Mm-hmm. And so suddenly you've got this network going on to the next substation where you've got the ponds and you've got the wild planting as well. You're creating a new corridor through the landscape. So I had initially thought the book was going to be very simply good lines, bad lines, hedges good, roads bad. But I actually found, maybe it's my internal optimist, that there's good to be found in most things.
Mm. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a fantastic idea when you think about utilising that space that you never really think about, do you? It's I mean, we've been thinking about up here doing some work with golf courses as well. We're going to be working with golf courses because you get a lot of land where it's just basically it's landscaped, isn't it? Because it's not really productive or doing anything. So there might be a project in the making for us on working with golf courses and doing.
Look to, I think, the Audubon Society in America. I think they did a whole bit of work about golf courses looking at this. Now, one of the problems is that golf courses, apart from being a hideous sort of exclusion from the landscape and privatizing land, which should be otherwise people should be allowed access to. And in some parts of the country, vast amounts of excess of water being used. They also can and do slather the place in a bunch of agrochemicals, which are iniquitous to life because they want to remove that sort of thing. But sensitive golf courses do exist. And I'm sure I remember that there was a campaign or some plan to do something with golf courses many, many years ago. I don't know whether it ever took off, but it was, if we look at a golf course, you want to create good hedgehog habitat. You've got a whole bunch of rough in the middle of a golf course with some trees and things, and these are barriers, and makes it exciting for the people who get turned on by hitting small white balls with a stick. Never understood it myself. But you can create these landscapes in a way that wildlife will also really benefit. And if you don't kill everything on it, and you accept that maybe having a few worm casts on your greens just adds to the excitement, you're There'll be food for hedgehogs, a shelter for hedgehogs, and actually, because you've excluded people from it to a large extent, there's space for hedgehogs to be undisturbed. You know, they're not going to be, I mean, the park, which is just behind my garden here, is a fantastic space for hedgehogs, theoretically. But it's every dog in Oxford comes here, and it's wonderful. We've got a dog now. It's great. And our dog is on a lead the entire time because he's a rescue hound. But you know, all of the little terriers charging around the place, having a time of their lives, scaring the living bejesus out of any hedgehog, which has the temerity to nest in the wilder patches in there. So there will be no hedgehogs nesting in the day in there. But golf course, yeah, go for it. Yeah. I would look forward to hearing how that goes.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know, definitely, because I think it's something we're looking at. I'm sure it's being done as well. I think you're right. I think someone has done it even in the UK as well. But we need to do our research on that and join up with those people and get some advice. But that's going to be one of the projects as well. So I suppose, I mean, I've literally only got these 3 books. Am I missing anybody? Because I've got Linescapes, The Prickly Affair, and The Hedgehog book. What are we missing? You've got any more?
So there is the Beauty and the Beast I mentioned, where I went and met 15 different people a bit like me. And this was, some people thought alarming that there might be 15 people a bit like me, but I met, up your way, actually not far from Middlesbrough, I met the wonderful, now I think late Dennis Summer-Smith, the world's leading expert on sparrows. So he was telling me about why sparrows are so amazing. I essentially was trying to meet my midlife crisis head on, because obviously I got my first and last ever tattoo of a hedgehog. And I just thought, can I get somebody to convince me that their species, you know, whether it's the otter or the bottlenose dolphin or the beaver or the water vole or the moths or the bats or whatever, that their species are as amazing as the hedgehog. And I ended up having it as a competition. Who would convince me of their species? And I'd get my second and definitely last ever tattoo of that species. It was absolutely, I had so much fun. And so yeah, that book was, I have to tell my wife how hard it was to write it, because I went and met 15 people who are passionate, enthusiastic advocates for the wonders of nature and hang out with them for some time. And again, this is a holiday. It's not, it's really hard work, okay, really hard work. But it was, I mean, it's just, and the idea was to look at this idea of how can you tell the story about nature with passion. You know, I wasn't after tinfoil hat wearing, crayon wielding woo experts. You know, I wanted people who had a scientific discipline, you know, who actually rigorously did this. Miriam Darlington, for example, amazing poet and author, and she she's written a book all about otters called Otter Country, which is superb. And so, you know, she's got a deep love, and she, you know, talked to me about. Have you got Otter Country there?
I have, not here, but I've got it definitely. Didn't she write? Did she write Owl Sense as well?
Yeah, she wrote Owls as well.
Yeah, I've got that one as well. Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, Miriam's wonderful, and you know, she was, you know, when she was a kid, she was an otter. Yeah, that was her entire world, and she absolutely loved otters. So you know, people who had that level of passion, that level of interest, and I really. So that book was great fun. And then the other book was simply the book on the iconography of hedgehogs, published by Reaction. I mean, it's a more of an academic-y look at things, and it's yeah. I mean, I had to edit out my jokes basically, but it's again loads of pictures, and it's a serious look at the way that the hedgehog has been used in art and literature and poetry and pornography. I mean, really, just be careful what you search for on the internet, I say. And it's a fascinating sort of insight into all those things about the hedgehog which you didn't really know about. You know, I was telling you about the Hotchie Witchy earlier. And if you look in Shakespeare, hedgehogs appear a couple of times, and there they are used as an insult. And if you think back to the Gaelic, so whether it's the Irish, the Scottish, or the Welsh Gaelic, it's the hedgehog word is Grainog or Granog or Cranog, and it translates as the ugly one. And so you can see how things have shifted for the hedgehog over time, from being an animal which was of the edge, which was being blamed for a whole bunch of things, which was used as an insult, through now to the nation's favorite animal. Every time there's a voter up poll, you know, the hedgehog wins. So it's an amazing transformation. And a lot of the pivot happens around the beginning of the 20th century with Beatrix Potter. But you know, it has become this animal, which is an icon around which we can really sort of circle our efforts, because you know, they're unthreatening. They don't bite you. They don't run away. You can get nose to nose with them, and they can live alongside you in your garden if you're lucky enough. And that's just that first step to falling in love with nature, and thereby hangs the revolution.
Absolutely. I think that's great. So I think to finish off, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you as well. We've learned so much. It's been great. What we'll do is we'll share a list of the books that you've written, and obviously try and get some get people to think about the books that they like and buy them, of course, which is really good. And if we can keep in touch with you, obviously we will have some projects underway, I'm sure, because this is just the start of something for us. It was the Hogtober campaign was just something we thought of that was a really good thing to do for our sake as well, because we wanted to learn as much as we could about hedgehogs for any project that we might be doing in the future, about recognising signs as well, I suppose, for hedgehog activity. But also I think it's been a pleasure just learning about the hedgehog in general. And I think since your petition, I feel that there's a bit of a shift in attitudes and cultures towards hedgehog. I don't know whether you're picking up on it. Obviously you will be, but I've seen a noticeable difference of people who want to learn more about hedgehogs, and it's been quite a popular, Well,
we set up the petition. I mean, it's 966,000, I think now it's on, and because it's so unmanageable, I can't communicate with the people who are signing it. So we set up I set up a Facebook group, Hedgehog Highways Facebook group, and then that is now nearly at 14,000 strong. And the level of interest that people have, thank goodness for my 3 moderators who keep things in check, because not everybody is nice, but most people are. And so you people, I'm interested in, how do I get hedgehogs into my garden? What sort of hedgehog food should I use? What sort of box should I use? How do I make a hole? All of these things. And there are people out there sharing their examples, sharing the photographs of what they do, sharing what they've learned. And for many people, it is a stepping stone. It's the gate. We worry about gateway drugs. This is the gateway animal. It's the first step you take. You get in love with it, you fall in love with the hedgehog, and then everything else opens up for you.
Fantastic. I like that. That's a good analogy. Yeah. So I mean, I think what we'll do is we'll let you get off now, because obviously you've been talking to me for nearly an hour, which I'm thankful for. Thank you so much. It's been great. It's been brilliant. And we'll definitely keep in touch, and we will raise awareness of your books and everything, and the petition. We'll share that again if you wish. And we'll share any other petitions that you've got that you would like us to share as well. We've
got a British Hedgehog Preservation Society one, a .gov one, about trying to raise the level of protection the hedgehogs receive from Schedule 6 to Schedule 5 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act. It's a slightly esoteric one, but it's a really important bit of work. That's nearly at 50,000. We get to 100,000, and there has to be a debate in Parliament. So I'll pop the link through for that for you as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's brilliant. So thank you so much for your time, and it's
an absolute pleasure.
Touch.
I look forward to coming and visiting.
Yes, very much so. We'll get you to come and open the hedgehog garden that we create somewhere, and we will certainly work on Team Hedgehogs as well for all of our business projects that we're going to be working on. That's going to be pretty cool, actually. I think everyone would quite like that, so it'd be a good one to do. So thank you so much, and good luck with the petition. Hopefully we'll share that as well. We'll see if we can get it over the line. Let's get it to not £1 million that we said before on our social media, but 1 million signatures.
if only I got paid by the result, but no chance of that. The world of a hedgehog researcher will remain one of enormous fun and enormous poverty. But that's just the choice I make.
And we'd say thank you as well for being one of our Boss Hog ambassadors as well.
Sorry, it's cold in my shed.
It's cold. No, I'm going to when the summer comes back, we're back to t-shirts. So thanks very much to you, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.